If you were a teenager or maybe even DJing like me in the 80s, you likely know everything about the 12-inch vinyl record, often dubbed as maxi singles, the bigger and better sounding wide groove vinyl format that got spun in the clubs. Those special releases often featured extended versions, dub mixes, a cappellas, instrumentals and remixes popular with DJs and dance floors that have really never gotten the attention they deserve by record labels notoriously known for not maintaining their historic master archives. And as a result of not collecting the original masters, digital reissues of these historic gems are often based on a vinyl copy. Thankfully, Dutch DJ and producer Ben Liebrand, famous for numerous great remixes, consistent mega mixes, and productions over many decades in the dance music industry, is quite an audiophile, taking interest in this very thing and made it a part of his life work to track down and preserve the best masters of these special versions. I invited the man, the myth, the legend himself to tell us more about it here on the channel. The first release was like in 2003, 4?
I think in 2002, 2003, yes. At the time, I was working on the Grand Mix Disco Edition. I was asking for a 12-inch version of a Robert Palmer track. The record company just sent me a short snippet and an MP3. And I'm like, but that's not the master. And then it turned out that they didn't have the master at hand. And the person that was sending me the files didn't know the difference between something that makes sound and a master. And then it turned out that, yes, they did have an archive, but in order to send someone into the archive, that would cost so much money that they could never earn it back. So that's why the record company who has the masters, has them in their archive, doesn't use the archive because it's too expensive to retrieve something from the archive. And that kind of was the spark, like, at this moment, I see such strange things going on with record companies discarding their archives, just throwing them in the bin. And that was the incentive for me to pitch this idea to Sony. I want to make a series which collects the long versions, the 12-inch versions, which I feel important in master quality.
It seems to me like quality has always been something to recognize you by, right?
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
I'm a nerd. Up till I think about 1995, I never used master compression at all. And the thing, my reasoning was that if you are in a club, obviously there is a lot of noise, there is a lot of reverb going on. So I was always trying to make my 12-inch version sound that extra bit of clean, so that when you would play it in a club with the extra whatever's going on in the club, it would still sound very clear. It's a different philosophy to the whole thing.
And how does it go about? How do you do the selections and find the masters?
It's a difficult process for a couple of reasons. The reason to start this whole series is because it turned out that record companies, they have the rights for a specific track, but they don't have the master. And in other occasions, you have the master, but you don't know which company has the rights. Then you have companies that just don't want to cooperate for utterly silly reasons. People are asking for specific tracks with that particular company because that company is not putting out the masters. They might make available an MP3 for anyone, but not an uncompressed master. Obviously, we are trying to get specific tracks. We might get through to the record company or we might not. So there are always a bunch of tracks left which we couldn't get. So those also are transferred to the next edition, see if we can get them then. For example, several years back, I was trying to get Rotation and Beyond by Herb Alpert, but he wasn't licensing out anything. I sent them the opening dance of my wedding with my wife to Rotation by Herb Alpert. I sent them the video with the message, this might indicate how much this track means to me. Within 4 hours, everything was okay. So we got permission to use the track. You have to convey the point to the record company that this is not because you're throwing together a compilation. This is a compilation which contains the important tracks. And that's also where the name Grand came from. So if you look at edition 1, 2, 3, 4, that's all filled with stuff where I'm like, doesn't matter what happens, first I want to have these tracks on, and then we can get to the rest. If we get the permission, that's one hurdle taken. Then we go to find the best sounding version. If we can trace the tapes, we also go after the tapes to see if we can get a transfer from the tape. Here's the thing that a lot of people don't think about. When a tape was made in the early 80s, and in the early 80s, halfway the 80s, you had the first available digital recording techniques, and they were only 16-bit 44.1 kilohertz. But it would be a transfer from the original master, which was very fresh, to 16-bit 44.1 kilohertz. Yep. So many years later, you can make a 24-bit transfer, but that tape doesn't sound fresh anymore. So you have a pristine capture of a tape that meanwhile is actually deteriorated, which results in a very gritty mid-high end. And it turns out that an old 16-bit transfer just sounds infinitely better than a new transfer made today from that same tape, because it's just so old. Tapes that I have been working on for projects back in the 80s, which the first thing I would do is also record it onto the Sony F1. It's AD and DA converters. They just sound sweet. I will be looking for the master that reproduces the most effortlessly, the most smooth, where there's no distortion, where there's no emphasization going on, where it's just smooth. So if we can get the tape, that would be fine. Then if we can get a digital transfer from the record company, which was made back then, that's also fantastic. With CD, what I do is that over the last years, when also Facebook came available, I request masters. And it turns out I'll have my own version. I'll have the version from the record company, and then I'll get in another 60 different versions from people. I put them all in my editor, and then I just start A-Bing until I end up in the last one. And it can be that the last one is either the one I transferred way back in the day from my Sony F1 system, or it can be the one from the record company, but it can also be from some rare Japanese pressing from the CD, where the technician made such a fantastic transfer that it beats all the other ones I've got. Sometimes a CD version might still be better than the version I got from the record company, even though it was a good transfer. And we also had it in the past where there was no digital version. So I transferred it from vinyl, and I transferred it on a proper high-end turntable using different cartridges. So much attention putting into this transfer, and it really sounded great. And then I put on the master tape, and it still was like somebody walked up and pulled away the curtains from your speakers, opening up the high end, and they're just drawing away a layer of grit in the high end. And that was like, yes, okay, yes, I get it. This now proves that with all the technology I had and the high-end cartridge, still the master will sound better. And that was a digital master.
Have you made any house calls in order to obtain better masters?
But you told me to come over.
Funny enough / sadly enough, it turns out it's not an opinion, but it's more like a what I've gathered from all these calls with a lot of producers and a lot of colleague remixers is that I'm one of the very, very few who took the effort of making their own master copies. Whilst most remixers, when the assignment is done, then the master is sent out, and they haven't kept anything for themselves.
Exactly.
And they don't have the multi-track, they don't have the 2-track masters. I think I've been one of the few that loved all of this so much that I also took the effort to save these masters. It was just getting in the tapes and the utter thrill of holding these tapes, holding these masters. The other thing would be to be able to go back to a version. If something happens, that I can still go back to the digital copy I made.
Exactly.
When the tape came in. I didn't even know there would be a later. I didn't even know that there would be the necessity to start a series like Grand 12 Inches.
Wow. Ben Liebrand,
Cool.
The highest quality, most consistent man in the music industry.
Just trying to do what makes sense.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Ben.
Thank you.
The Grand 12-inch series now spans 19 editions, with number 19 just being released. When you purchase the series, you can even get downloadable updates as uncompressed WAV files if Ben finds better sounding masters or alternative versions. As a total sucker for that kind of nostalgia, I naturally got them all, re-experiencing the tracks from a special time in the best shape they have ever been. Enjoy all the other content on the channel and see you soon. Thank you for your support, everybody.